Okay, we have a fantastic group of people so far. 51 people with us right now. I want to thank you all for joining us. This is the first of a series of webinars that AFSC is doing on migration during a presidential election year in the United States. So, big topic. My name is Amy Gottlieb. I am the Director for Migration for the US of the American Front Service Committee. I have been with AFSC for a very long time. Many of you know me in lots of different roles. I've been in this particular role since about May of 2023, and I work with an extraordinary team at AFSC. For those of you who are not familiar with AFSC, I'm going to give you a little background. I'm going to share what this series is going to look like. But just a couple of sort of small tech things as we get started. I'm going to present today along with a few of my amazing colleagues from throughout the US. We are going to have some time for Q&A. We kept this as a meeting format so that we can have interaction with folks. In future meetings, we're going to hope to do some breakout rooms, but not today. You can use the chat. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. We're going to have a Q&A session towards the end where you can raise your hand and ask a question if you prefer. You are welcome to have your cameras on if you're comfortable. And we really want to make this as engaging and useful for you all as possible. So we definitely will appreciate any feedback you have for the content, the format, the structure, everything you learn, etc. So, as I said, I'm Amy Gottlieb, the Director for Migration in the US, and that is a big job. It's always a big job to sort of be the person that people look to kind of represent organizational positions on a really challenging topic like migration. I only do the work I do because we have extraordinary staff and community members who we are learning from, who we are taking our cues from, who we are developing our policy positions from, and who are doing the work on the ground. I have a very privileged position where I sit, and I'm able to kind of help interpret what we learn at the local and grassroots level and bring that externally, bring it to the policy level, and hopefully, in the long run, be able to influence migration policy in the US in a positive way. So I really just want to thank our speakers. Thank you all for being here tonight. We will have, at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about the next sessions, but I know it's time commitment in the evening, so really grateful for that. Really grateful for our awesome IT department, our meeting support, our comms department for helping get out the information. This is really a team effort, and it makes it all easier for all of us to come together when we've got this groundswell of support. So I'm just going to read you language from AFSC's strategic plan, our very aspirational goal, what we would like to see, what the American Friends Service Committee in our strategic plan, which is available on our website, says about migration. And what we would like to see is a world in which migrants, refugees, and internally displaced people have the power to determine where they live and the opportunity to thrive in society. So that is our big, big picture vision. And I'm happy to share that with you because I look at it, I read it, and I think it's really basic, right? It's really, we're not asking for a lot, that people should have the right to determine where they live and the opportunity to thrive. Those are really basic level things that we should all aspire to. But in fact, we live in a world right now where that's not possible. It's not possible for millions of people throughout the world who are displaced, who are either internally displaced in their own countries or are seeking protection or safety or the ability to feed their families by moving to another country. And we decided to do these webinars now because we are in an election year, as you all know. The New Hampshire primary is today. Um, and we've already in January been hearing very negative narratives about migrants, very challenging, ugly, xenophobic, racist commentary. We're hearing that many people are going to be deciding who to vote for based on migration policy. So there is a lot that we are hearing and that we want to sort of work with you all to help you feel confident that we can talk about migrants and migration policy in ways that are welcoming and caring and respectful of the rights and dignity for all people. So the format today, I've got a couple of amazing speakers with me who I'll introduce in a moment. Each is going to present, I have 3 questions that I asked them to present. They're going to present really briefly. So the first point is each person is going to present what the vision point that they're presenting on, and then what would it look like if that vision was a reality? And then the third question is just a little bit about how AFSC is doing our work towards that vision. I will say that we know that our vision is lofty, and we intentionally are bold and lofty and willing to say that we believe we need to live in a world where every single person is treated with dignity and respect. And that is kind of the fundamental baseline that we're working from. So it might seem radical, but it also becomes really so important on a daily basis to remind ourselves that's what we're doing. These are people, these are human beings that are forced from their lands. And we're going to talk about ways to be welcoming and ensure that if people come here, when people come here, their rights are protected and they have an ability to live safely and securely. So I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker, Douglas Juarez, who is coming to us tonight from Guatemala City. Thank you, Douglas. Douglas is our regional advocacy coordinator for our Latin America programs. I'm really grateful that you took time to be with us today. Thank you, Douglas.
Thank you, Amy. Well, I'm really honored to be here, and also I'm very glad to see a lot of people here. I think that everybody, we are gonna learn together. So I'm part of the AFSC team in Latin America. So we have programs in Mexico, in Guatemala, in El Salvador, and also we are working close with our policy and advocacy office in Washington. So I'm really happy to share part of the analysis that we made with the Latin American colleagues and the communities and the organizations. So I have the challenge to talk about root causes of migration in a couple of minutes. So I will try to do my best, and I am gonna share one. Let me see, a couple of slides so we can guide ourselves. Everybody's, yeah? Are you looking
Yeah,
to
we're
the,
good.
okay,
Yes.
excellent. So as I just have a couple of minutes, I will try to just trying to share some key ideas in terms of the root causes of migration. And I would like to start by sharing like what we call the foundation of the system we are living. I think this is really important to go into what is underlying all the root causes of migration. So the first one is that this system is based in the hierarchy between human beings, and there is also hierarchy between human beings and modern nature, and that's colonial thinking. So I think that is important to keep that in mind. And also the second is that this system is based in violence, exploitation, accumulation, and dispossession. And also I just copied this caption around capital above life. I think that's the main idea of capitalism. And if we add the first one and the second, it's we have the hierarchy between human beings and this system that is exploiting the bodies of the people and also their communities and the Mother Earth. There is work that is that is for one type of persons, and this is work that is for another type of person. And this is a relationship between different geographies, and I am going to talk about this in the next slide. And also, I just want to make a note that when we talk about migration in the region, we talk about forced migration, specifically because this is something that has to be with the multicultural of the migration, but also the intersectional, and there is also different layers. So I am going to talk about like root causes of migration in general, but also just taking to the mind, that there is different to talk about systems of oppression for a woman, for an indigenous community, for youth, for children, and from people from different parts of the world. So I just want to that everybody can take this in their own minds. And to make it like very graphic, I just put this tree because I think that when we talk about root causes of migration, there is this idea that the people is moving because of poverty, lack of employment and opportunities. Also, we talk about insecurity, because of organized crime, gang violence, gender violence, environmental degradation, persecution, and we have a lot of different like elements of the context that are pushing the people to move from their communities. And I want to make this a slide because underneath of these elements of the context, there is a political, economic system that is making these elements to take place in different territories. So I would like to talk about this relationship right now. And also, let me see, okay. So when we talk about like the political and economic system, I would like to make a difference between the modernity idea and the dependency. And I think this is important because sometimes when we talk about the root causes of migration, there is this main idea that the communities and the countries that the people is moving away need like development policies. But that development policies comes from a modernity idea that it's, put into the place the idea of to move from the agriculture to industry, also to move from a low to a high social class. And there is this narrative of development that I think is really important. Then the communities that we are working with, they don't see like this type of idea of development as the wrong practices, in the communities, especially in the indigenous communities. But also I put here another text in terms of dependency. And I think that's really important to take into account when we talk about root causes of migration, because this is a global system that we are living that is based in this exploitation of the people, the extraction and the exploitation of what they call resources, of the Mother Earth. And also that relationship between the North and the South is not only geographically, because we have global South in countries from the global North and vice versa. So I would like to take that into consideration. And also, I'm talking about this because right now the system itself, that we are living, it's based in these practices and policies that provide all the conditions to the corporation to continue to make money, So in this idea that we are living right now, this economic framework, we have that the corporation provides services, but also that the states must provide conditions for the corporation. And I'm talking about this because in the countries that the people is moving from their communities, there is low wages, there is low taxes that the states are promoting for the corporation to have conditions to continue operating, and to have infrastructure and also to have police to repress the demonstrations of the people. So there is all the conditions that we are living that make that root causes that I showed before, the lack of employment, the insecurity, the persecution of human rights defenders, the environmental degradation, that is not only that has responsible of that, and that's the system that is has been constructed and development to continue profiting from the corporations, but also there is alliances between the governments and the elites, especially not only the global capital, but also the elites at national and regional level. So, and for me, that has to be also with corruption and impunity that we have in our countries. So all the system has been made to function, for the corporations to continue profiting and forced migration. And that's what I make that note that forced migration, sorry, is this one, is functional to the system, because if the people keep moving, so there is conditions to continue exploitation of the people, to continue dispossess the people from the communities, from the natural resources. So what I want to highlight in this last minute that I have is that when we see the root causes of migration, the people is moving because of poverty, insecurity, gender violence, environmental degradation, but it has a system that sustain that root causes and also that make money around that. Just one example, the people from Haiti, for example, they move from Haiti because there is no conditions, there is violence, there is a lot of lack of opportunities and employment, but that the consequence of a system that make large scale projects of agriculture, and now the soil, it doesn't work anymore for produce food, and also the impact of the hurricanes and a lot of degradation of the soil make more impact in the communities of the people. So even if the people is moving and the conditions are not the best conditions to keep the people in their communities, there is a lot of responsibilities on the big capitals that are making that the conditions at local level are keeping worsening, but also that forced migration is functional, so the corporations can make more money with the irregular migration to pay less salaries or don't have rights, and also I just want to keep that in mind, and that's the last one, to remember that idea of capital above life. I think that's really important, and that's the main idea of this system, because someone is making money also with the migration system, and that's something that I think that is like closing the circle, So let's to try to take out all the resources from the community, to have conditions for live, and then to stop forced migration, because irregular migration provide the conditions so the big capitals continue with the exploitation of the people and the communities. So I will stop here, and yeah, I will stop
Thank
sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Douglas. That was a great intro to why people migrate. We hear regularly in the media that there's a crisis at our border, there's a migration crisis, and truly the crisis is that people are facing the conditions that they're facing in their home communities because of the factors that Douglas laid out and some others. I want to say that our migration work in AFSC is part of our larger work, which also includes peace building work and just economies work. So we are working in all of the places where we have these programs on migration, also on peace and justice, and looking towards building fair economies. I want to turn it over now to my colleague Benjamin Prado, who is the program coordinator for our U.S.-Mexico border program. I've had the honor of working with Benjamin for many, many years, and I think, as we're talking about borders, our U.S.-Mexico border program has really done extraordinary work documenting what the conditions are for people to try to enter the U.S. And Benjamin's going to talk to us briefly about that. So thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you to my colleagues and everybody that has taken the time to participate in this call. As part a program coordinator for the U.S.-Mexico border program, the main thing that we've been dealing with are many times the symptoms of a global problem that we see. And it's not that the people migrating is the problem. In fact, migration is a natural condition of our existence as a species. It is very much a fundamental characteristic of our species that we migrate. There's no time in human history where people have not migrated. And that's an important point that we need to underline. So when we talk about creating lawful paths towards for migration, it should be really encapsulated within a framework of number one, human rights, and creating conditions for safe, dignified, and regular and orderly migration. And when we talk about this, I mean, there's certain compacts on migration that exist internationally, but I think one of the most important elements is understanding the historical context, some of the root causes that my colleague just laid out, and also very important is ensuring that people have also the right not to migrate, which is also an important factor for our communities that have been impacted by many of the policies that and reasons for migration that my colleague just presented. Right, we live in a society that has converted migration into a commodity, right? And so in order to profit off of this system, which because we live in a capitalist society, it creates these terms such as legal versus illegal, right? And legality is not synonymous with justice, peace, nor democracy. In fact, this very country was founded on slavery. And that's really important. And slavery was legal, right, in this country. It was founded on certain principles, certain ideas of supremacy, whether it be the doctrines of discovery or manifest destiny, which laid the groundwork for the genocide of many indigenous nations that have been here since before there was the United States of America. And so I think it's very important and very critical that we look at these questions of legality versus illegality and see who is it really benefiting, right? Migration as a political tool to characterize certain people as having authorization. Really, legality comes from the concept of that it's really an opinion at the end of the day. It's the opinion of the ruling class, and the ruling class in power has designated certain people as having the ability to work, for example, and those that are not authorized to work. That's why we have these distinctions between the authorized worker and the unauthorized worker, right? And if we were to talk about a system that is just, we would ensure that everybody has the ability to work, because that's another important characteristic of our existence as a species, that we work from the sweat of our brow to be able to feed, clothe, and house our families. So I think that's really important for us to highlight. The other piece of this is that when we look at these certain existing mechanisms for so-called legal migration, there is no real path for the great majority of migrants, the great majority of the 258 million people that currently find themselves in a condition of having to leave their countries, whether it be because of invasions, because of wars, because of occupations, many of them financed by this very same government that is able to go and implement certain economic policies either through hook or by crook, right? And we say hook, or when we talk about the United States going out and finding and advancing its economic objectives within the neoliberal economic order that my colleague just presented, any government that does not agree or align with the United States interests are very quickly either removed through invasions, coups, or even straight out occupations, like we're seeing today with the continual bombardment and making war throughout the world. But one of the really critical important pieces is if we want to really think about equitable migration and people's ability to migrate. We just have to look in the mirror and say, when we go out and people within this country go out and want to travel, you can quickly buy and purchase an airline ticket. As long as you have a US passport, you're able to go practically anywhere around the world. And I think that those are some of the questions of equity that we have to highlight and ensure that everybody has the ability and the right for the freedom of mobility. And so, it's rather hypocritical on the one hand to be building walls, designating certain people as not able to enter into the United States because they haven't gone through a lawful process. And so, we need to really look at that and expose, really, at the end of the day, the hypocrisy of people that say that people should come here lawfully or through a lawful path, because at the end of the day, there is no lawful path. Unless you have $2 million to invest in the United States, you can become a US citizen practically relatively quick, right? Or, in certain circumstances, there's a white nationalist policy where it says that if you are in alignment with our objectives, you'll get the red carpet treatment, such as what happened with Ukrainians in this past situation at the border, where Ukrainians were allowed to come in without no problem, but yet all the great majority of Africans, Latin Americans, Mexicans, and all the other people that have been wanting to cross have been relegated to conditions of inhumane treatment. So those are just a couple of things that I think are really important for us to really reflect on as a society. And my time is up, so I'll go ahead and turn it over. Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. That was really, really good intro to what we're really hoping to see. That, we want to see like safe and lawful ways for people to enter the United States, but instead what we've seen are these brutally dangerous border walls and additional militarization of our borders, and now further talk about possibly even militarizing the northern border as well, that are leading to just extraordinary deaths and disruption of communities along the border, as well as deep and long-standing family separation. Okay, thank you, Benjamin. Just a couple other commentaries. One of the things that we've been considering, some language we've been talking about, is really think about people should have the freedom to stay in their communities, but if they can't do that, they should have the freedom to move. And then they should also have the freedom to return, which I think resonates a lot with what's happening worldwide, and particularly in Gaza, that people should have that ability to move. And how can we shift our narrative and our conversations so that we understand the true global phenomenon that migration is, and that we want to ensure our basic goals are that people have access to food and healthcare and education and the ability to stay with their families. Okay, my next amazing speaker is Araceli Argueta, who is the Director for Organizing and Advocacy for our New Jersey Immigrant Rights Program. And Araceli is going to talk to us a little bit about detention deportation. We have two more speakers after that, and then we're going to come bring it all together. Thank you, Araceli.
Hi, everyone. I will share a little bit my screen. And as you see, talking about detention and deportation could take us hours. However, what I wanted to share with you are some of the most important things of what is happening with detention and deportation in the U.S., and also some ideas of what we are working in order to get this solved. So there is in the U.S., and you have heard from Douglas and from Benjamin, there is a cruel and oppressive system of migration in the U.S., but that's also affecting enforcement, detention, deportation of immigrant communities that affects human dignity and rights, and it tears apart communities. It drags people from their communities and put them in different situations that are, as Douglas framed really well, different layers of oppression, not only while they are getting to the US, but once they are here. So the vision I'm presenting, sorry, I'm trying to move this around. So the vision that I'm presenting is about building policies that respect the rights and dignity of people that it's migrating, and to build systems at a national level that actually respect human rights, that recognize that non-human is illegal, and stop detention and stop deportation. And how this will look like in a probably idealistic way is building communities instead of cages, putting an effort on fulfilling people's needs, ensuring that the narrative is built on understanding the difference and reducing stereotypes and racism and all the different layers of oppression, and protecting human rights. And this vision comes like there is a lot of anti-immigrant policies and a rhetoric that have increased the spaces and the reduction of the spaces for people, and that have increased the arrests of people. And we have documented some of the things that had happened in the US for immigration, and some of the cases that we have documented that people that it's putting in detention is denial in communication with their social workers, with the lawyers that are taking care of the cases. We have denial of health care provided for people who is in detention. We have cases of mental illness that have been that people who have get worse for the detention because of isolation and the meaningful treatments to the people who is in detention. And those detention centers are not only run by government, but they are also run by private corporations that abuse people, and that takes part of their life. There is a phrase that haunts me a lot, that one of the people who was in detention once told, and it's that in the detention center, dreams turns into dust. And I think that what we are trying to build is a space that people can dream again, and people can find solutions for the problems that they are trying to solve, finding solutions for their family, not tearing their communities apart, trying to stop deportation in many different ways. And I mean, what we are doing in the program, mainly in New Jersey, is that we are working in kind of an holistic way, trying to connect social service, legal representation, and organizing and advocacy together, because we could be representing people in courts for years, but if we don't have meaningful laws, meaningful changes in policies, then the deportation and detention wouldn't stop. So we have represent people in different cases, asylum cases, people who have suffered violence. During last year, we help a lot of people who is in detention. Actually, it was 360 people that were in detention who received legal representation and support. But also, as it cannot stay that way, we need to ensure that the voices of immigrant communities are heard into federal and state level. So we are working towards creating and giving back the power that sometimes is removed from people. It's not that we are empowering, but it's actually reclaiming power for people and by themselves, and then advocate for elimination and immigration detention. So we eliminate it, and we are calling for improved conditions while people is detained. During the work in the state, there have been several detention centers closed, and in New Jersey, there is only one remaining detention center, the Elizabeth Detention Center, and we are working towards closing it and finding the space for not having detention facilities in state. We want to shift and update policies, including immigrant rights. We want also to recognize that the stories and the different levels of oppression that they have faced during their whole process are faced and are also including the narratives that are in the mass media, but also in the voices of people. These are some of the laws and bills that we have been moving. Recently, we passed the language access bill that would guarantee that people will have also access to 7 different language translation in those languages. And for instance, we are working at a national level trying to connect the different racist measures and stereotype measures that have led to put in detention a lot of people because of their ethnicity or their race with the new way forward, including individual cases and promoting that people who has been in detention or filed for deportation to stop those cases and to free them from detention, but also stop deportation so we can have a solution before it actually happens, because it becomes harder once the process have been fulfilled. So we have run different individual campaigns to stop the process while it is starting. There is a lot of work still to do in regards to detention and deportation, and it comes also with narratives, how to build upon it, how to build policies that actually create meaningful and long-lasting change. And that will be it on my side.
Thank you, Araceli, so much for that. And all of our programs throughout the US and outside the US as well really are doing this extraordinary work to both support and welcome immigrant communities and really advocate for fundamental change to our immigration laws and policies. We have two more speakers. We're going to hear from our colleague, Jennifer Piper, out of Colorado, program director for our Colorado Immigrant Rights Program. And just to also, kind of acknowledge that I think many of you are here today because some of the real questions that are raised by the media and by all the hype around this so-called migration crisis they're hard to answer. And so we're presenting our vision and sort of laying the groundwork for you today, but we're going to have a lot of opportunity moving forward if you're able to join our future webinars, and I'll give you the schedule later. But we are going to really dig deep into, how do we talk about this? What are some of the solutions to what are being presented as problems? And I think Colorado is an extraordinary example of really having worked and sustained work for so many years and turning Colorado into one of the most anti-immigrant states in the country to recently one of the most pro-immigrant states in the country, which is maybe shifting a little bit now, but has been extraordinary work that AFSC has been part of for many years. So thank you, Piper.
First, I have to figure out how to unmute myself. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, you're good.
So we left permanency and a path to citizenship to the end because it's really sort of the thing that we can do to uphold people's dignity once they've already been forced out of their country of origin and on into increasingly militarized border systems across the world, not just across the Americas. So this solution really goes towards people who are already in the US, have been residing in the US either with temporary status or in an undocumented fashion where they aren't recognized by the federal government as full citizens, full residents, full neighbors of ours in our communities and in our states. So right now it's estimated that there's about 12 million people that are undocumented in the United States. And then there's an additional 5 million folks who have some form of temporary status. And people who have temporary status don't have any clear pathway to ever access permanency in the United States. People who are undocumented don't have a clear and transparent and accessible pathway, no matter how long they're here or how many of their family members are citizens, to access citizenship and permanency in the United States. And we have not passed a law since 1986 that allows anyone to get onto a pathway to citizenship. We have passed, and I say we because it's both parties in power, regardless of party in the United States. Both parties have passed dozens of laws that exclude, that put more people off the path to permanency and into a path of vulnerability to deportation. But we haven't passed any law since '86 that really allows people to access permanency or citizenship in the United States. So it's important to understand that it's about more than elections, and especially in an election year, that this is a vision we want to put forward to all of our elected officials and all of the people that are citizens in the country. So these are our members in the background, and you can see we have both allied and citizenship, allied and immigrant members. And I am going to go ahead and change. So why permanency? Why is permanency important? So it's important because people are already embedded and a part of the fabric of our communities. And by recognizing them with a pathway to permanency or citizenship, we're keeping loved ones together. So the vast majority of people who are undocumented live in mixed status families, where either their spouse, their child, their parent are already citizens. Also, it's a way to be able to bring people who've been deported from the United States back home to where their support network is, back home to where they've established a life. Because often we have a lot of bars in our system that prevent people from being able to rejoin their family members in the United States. And also because it allows folks to participate in civic life and to maintain strong communities in the United States. So it's a way to recognize the equity that people have already built here, right? One of the things that many of our members would have shared with policymakers is that they have given 3 and 4 decades of their life now to the United States, the most productive years of their life. Their kids and their grandkids are born here. And so they really feel they've already earned it. And AFSC feels that too. And beyond that, we believe that every single person shouldn't have to earn it, that we should have equal rights in the countries and the societies we live in, regardless of whether we were born into that country or immigrated to that country. There should be a clear path for people to reach that equality and equity. It's a way to undo our history of having always a second class that underpins our country's economy and our country's life that Ben talked about earlier. And so when we talk about who's included or not included in our vision at the American Friends Service Committee, we don't leave anyone behind. It's not a competition to see who's the best immigrant or who is only the valedictorians, right? We're here in community saying that every single person deserves to be measured by the same bar in our society, regardless of their status, and that we're not going to trade one community of folks in order to get another community of folks status or access to this kind of permanency. So how are we doing this? Well, we organize from the ground up. So in everybody's talk, you heard them speaking about our community members who we organize with. We center people who are immigrants as the experts they are on their condition and the solutions. And then we give AFSC's pulpit and platform into their hands when we're doing our job correctly, so that they're speaking directly to decision makers and they're putting forward these same demands, and that we're putting the resources of our organization behind their creativity and their kind of prophetic witness. So for example, in Colorado, our members did with some other groups did a 4-day 60-mile walk through a congressperson's district to draw attention to her position that doesn't clearly support this path to citizenship, and really educate both citizens and immigrants and organize them. And that we build solidarity across communities and accountability. So that's the vision, is that together we're building the case for making the possible impossible. And that's sort of the last point I wanted to land on, is just 3 short years ago, one of the bills that our members have been advocating for, it's called the Registry Act. That politicians told us it would never be a bill, it would never be introduced in both houses, that it wouldn't be something that is possible. And now it is a bill. It's a bill in the Senate and the House at the federal level. It has a growing number of co-sponsors every single month. And alongside that is another bill called the New Way Forward, which would allow for more people to get on that same path to citizenship and to rejoin their family members here in the US. And when we back community solutions, like people who really understand what the barriers are in their life, when those solutions pass, it will have a greater impact. So rather than trying to read the tea leaves of which solution is the most politically palatable at any given moment, what we're dedicated to is in any year, but especially election years, is raising up what are the solutions that will really get at what the vast majority of Americans want, which is for people to have a path to citizenship and to have this not continue to be a wedge issue, right? Something that we can move on from as a country. So we're excited about that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Piper, so much. Okay, our last and of course not least speaker is Imani Cruz, who is the Global Policy Coordinator for Migration Justice for FSC based out of our DC office. And we're going to let Imani close out just this section of presentations and then talk just real briefly. We had a great question in the chat about, the general public opinion data on migration. So we'll talk a little bit about that and get you all set up for what's happening in the future. So thanks, Imani.
Thank you. I will be covering access to basic needs. This covers a lot of things, but I'll really focus on 3 big categories where immigrants have issues accessing basic needs. And this is access to employment, to legal representation, and to public benefits. So to start, access to employment, we support initiatives that expand and speed up access to work permits for all 11 to 12 million undocumented residents and newcomers. And we demand safe and secure working conditions with livable wages. But ultimately, we believe in the right to work for all with no government authorization required. As a thinking more long term, we want to see a system where people have access to work and do not need that government authorization. And so that's why we're against things like mandatory e-verify use and temporary programs that leave workers vulnerable to exploitation and do not offer a clear and accessible pathway to permanent citizenship. No one in this country can survive without working, and that is not specific to migrant communities, to immigrant communities. And we believe that everyone should have access to employment to be able to provide for themselves and their families and have that basic need met here in the US. Next is access to legal representation. As Araceli spoke on earlier, and as an abolition organization, we want to end immigration detention for all. So access to representation is a basic need in our current system. People involved in deportation proceedings are not given a court-appointed attorney, and only about 37% of immigrants and 14% of detained immigrants actually have lawyers going through immigration court. And it makes a huge difference on how far your case will go, what kind of forms of relief you apply for or even are aware of. AFSC offers legal services and trainings in select programs, and we're serving approximately 2,000 people annually. So through all this, we support universal representation campaigns with the goal to establish a federal right to publicly funded legal representation for all immigrants facing deportation. But ultimately, we want to dismantle the immigration court system as a whole. We don't want to see the need for everyone to have a lawyer. We want people to be able to come to this country and not have to go through the trauma, the surveillance, and the judging through this system that has put so much harm on so many families. And then for my last quick topic is access to public services. While immigrants, documented or not, pay billions of dollars in taxes every year, most do not have the opportunity to adjust their status and become eligible for public benefits. And even if they do become eligible, there is the 5-year ban, which arbitrarily bans eligible documented immigrants from accessing federal public benefits like SNAP or food stamps, Medicaid, or Social Security for their first 5 years in the U.S. It is to us, it is baffling that the same taxes that are going to fund those programs are being barred from people for 5 years to be used. And it is short-sighted to think that federal safety net programs are only available to people who have been here for a long period of time. That is not their purpose. The purpose of safety nets is to keep families together, to allow individuals to navigate periods of hardship, and to reduce the impacts of poverty on communities. Because of this, some states have eliminated the 5-year ban using state-only funding, but many states have enforced even more strict restrictions, resulting in inequalities depending on the state. So only Congress can really restore full eligibility to federal benefits, and that is something we work on at a local and a federal level. These are just a few of the things I covered. There are so many other issues that I did not talk about at the state and local level that are extremely important, like access to driver's licenses and access to language access, interpretation. But we will be talking about those in future webinars in more detail. So please come back and stay tuned to hear more about that work.
Thank you so much, Imani. We have given you a ton of information. You've been here with us for almost an hour, and we are, again, super, super grateful. So I'm trying to paste something in the chat, and it's not letting me. But we do have, as I mentioned a couple of times, this is the first of a series of 6 webinars. So they will be held the last Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm just going to let you know the topics. And if anybody has the capacity to paste our social media graphic in the chat, please do. Otherwise, we'll make sure to get it out to you after this. But our next one, February 27th, is going to be speaking specifically about the immigration process, how it works, right? How do people actually get into the United States and what happens? March 26th, we're going to hear way more in depth about border policy. April 23rd, we're going to hear about detention and deportation much more in depth as well. We are going to talk in May 28th, about employment and worker rights, immigrant worker rights. And then June 25th, which is going to be the final of our series, is going to be a conversation about how to really have the hard conversations. We're hoping throughout the series to give opportunities for folks to talk to each other, to have breakout sessions, so not as much talking to you as we did today, but really opportunities with guidance from some of our FSC staff to check in and kind of test, how some of our messaging is working. I did say in the chat, we know that things are really hard right now in terms of immigration narratives and, this constant, I live in New York City, our mayor talking about how new immigrants are destroying the city. It hurts my heart deeply to hear that language. And yet there are many, many people who are reacting strongly to very high numbers of new immigrants. And we want to be able to talk about that in a way that leads us to a welcoming place. I would like to, I see that there's another question in the chat, so I'm going to just pay attention to that quickly. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we'll close out in just a couple of minutes. But let me just take a moment. Who is pressing? Attorney General Garland. So this is specifically a question about the immigration court system, the question that's in the chat, and just things like requesting documents as evidence, not just the oaths of applicants, and removing judges who have absurdly high denial rates. the immigration court system is an administrative law system that is based within our Department of Justice. So it's part of the executive branch. It is not an Article 3 court, it is not an independent court. And, I think a lot of people believe that truly the only way to have any kind of fair immigration court system would be to have it as part of an Article 3 court. Barring that, of course, let's have a conversation about, we have millions of people in the immigration court backlog right now, and we just keep adding people to it, and they can add judges for years and years and years, but until there is fundamental change to how the system is working, we can't keep just, having people come in and get stuck in this immigration court system where they're going to be in limbo for years and years. It's not healthy for anybody at all. And, what are the visions that we want to think about that would make it possible for somebody to come here and not be stuck in an immigration court system that is, archaic and dysfunctional and unfair and based on, the judge that you happen to get, right? What does that look like? And not to say that our Article 3 court system is perfect in any way. And certainly our Supreme Court right now is presenting us with a lot of challenges. But I think that question is a really important question as we think about, what is the vision and how do we get to that vision? What are the baby steps that allow us to reach that vision that we'd like to see in the world? So we have a lot to talk about, and each of the next sessions is going to be a lot more in depth. We want to really hear from folks. We want to be able to answer the questions that you have and offer alternatives and maybe get us to a place where, if migration policy is going to be a key issue in this upcoming election, let's make it one where voices that reflect the values that our communities have shared, that those voices are part of that immigration conversation in our president's election in 2024. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions or quick comments before we close it out. It is 7:59 on the East Coast, and I want to respect your time. We're going to try to keep these within our 1 hour time frame. I just see a couple. Thank you, Piper. Great.
Yeah, I would just really encourage people to post things as you're leaving. If there's a thought that you have, a question you have, a doubt, or some kind of action or political context that you're hoping to get from the series, to post that in the chat. This group will take a look at those as we bring you the future pieces of this series.
Great comment. Thank you, Piper, for that. We will be, we don't yet have the full link, the registration link for the next sessions, but hopefully we'll get those posted in the next couple of days. We will be sending out a follow-up to this conversation with a recording. And feel free to invite your friends if you've enjoyed this conversation. And if you are interested in giving any feedback, you can feel free to be in touch with me. I will put my email address in the chat. You can always reach me at that email. I want to really thank all of you for sticking with us for this hour. And thank my colleagues, my dear colleagues, Douglas Benjamin, Araceli, Jennifer, Piper, and Imani for being with us. And future sessions will have other AFSC staff who will be sharing with you as well. If there is nothing else, I want to just say thanks and have a lovely evening. I look forward to more.
Thank you.